Thank you for joining this webinar. I'm going to walk you through the creation of 4 dashboards. Each one will be a little bit more complicated than the one before. The first example will create a pretty visualization and publish it as a dashboard. The second will have a much more detailed exploration of customer feedback data. The third is designed to illustrate that you can calculate anything and how to do it. And the final one will show a more traditional PowerPoint style replacement dashboard. So let's kick it off. We start a new document. This example is going to look at the perceptions of American travelers going to different holiday destinations around the world. I'm going to pull in a data file. It's a standard survey data file. Case from a SurveyMonkey survey. Add file as an SPSS data file. It's going to produce a whole lot of different bits of information, but we're going to focus on one key bit of data, which shows us the different concerns that people had. Looking at the table, it shows us in the top row that 52% of the people in the sample were concerned about cleanliness in Mexico, 9% were concerned about cleanliness in France, and so on. And so we want to find a way of visualizing this. It's a little more compelling than this table. It's much the same data that we often have for brand studies, where we're comparing perceptions of different brands. So most people's default chart to start with is a good old-fashioned bar chart. It's very, very rarely the best chart to use, is it? It's not obvious what patterns we can see here. Maybe show it as small multiples, which are usually much better for big grids of data. We start to see that at least clear differences in the patterns between the different brands, but can we explore that? Brands, countries, same thing. Let's put it as a pyramid. That's a little bit better again. Now, often with this type of data, your good old-fashioned palm tree, or not palm tree, radar chart, we'll come to the palm tree shortly, can be particularly effective, or spider chart as some people call them. And this one is in this case. And what makes it effective is that there are different patterns. And so you can look here and you go, Australia and France, different kind of pattern. If we look at that data, cost and none of these are the big driving things. Mexico and Egypt, broadly similar patterns, but with Egypt, there's slightly bigger concerns about language and friendliness and food. It's a good visualization, but I find them a bit too busy with all the labels. When they are too busy, nice and slightly obscure alternative is the palm trees visualization. It shows exactly the same type of data. I'm going to have to switch the rows and columns around. So it's in the same kind of way, except it uses little fronds to show each individual aspect of fronds, palm tree leaves. And so again, we're seeing Great Britain and Egypt, very similar shapes. And if we hover over them, we can see that it's cost and it is none of these, which are the key defining characteristics they have in common. Let's play around with the data just to make the patterns a little easier to see. So I'm going to group together by dragging and dropping the columns. China and Egypt, which are pretty similar shaped palm trees. Great Britain, Australia. All right, so now the height of the palm trees is showing average level of concern. I've basically ordered them according to country with the most concern, Egypt, to country with the least concern, Australia. And you can see that this also meant that we've got similar patterns grouped together. That's pretty cool. I'm going to get rid of the none of these category because I don't think that adds much. All right, I'm going to hide this table, and when I hide it, that just means that it won't appear when I publish the dashboard to anybody who's used that dashboard. Now we just need to make it look really, really pretty. And with the visualization, much like with PowerPoint, often the secret just comes down to having good background image. So you want to hunt around Shutterstock or something like that to find an appropriate image. And here's a great one that my design team found. They did a little tweak by putting the blue box on the end. And I should say, my design team is your design team if you want to use them. All right, let's just zoom out a little bit. shrink this one there. Not quite the size for the page, but it's a simple visualization that won't hurt us. Send it to the back. So you'll see Displayr here is working very much like PowerPoint as a design tool. See how clever this is? The little text of my visualization lines up with my islands. So I've got palm trees on an island. As I said, this is what makes it a completely reusable one for pretty much any data set. If you want to just add a little bit of bling to it, I'm going to tidy up the chart a little bit because I think some of the fonts are a bit too small. And we will, what else can we do to this one? We'll get rid of the axis label. Probably need a y-axis label. It's a bit obscure what it's showing us here, isn't it? All right, so we've built us a pretty little thing. Let's publish it. Publish this web page. Set it up with passwords so people can see it. It's now nice and secure. And ta-da, we've now got a little dashboard. We can just copy that URL and share it with people, and they can play around with it and explore it and find whatever insights they wish to. So a very simple example to start with. In this next example, we're going to examine campsite performance. Now this one's going to start off a little bit fiddly. When I say campsite, I mean a place where you go camping. Again, I'll pull in a data set from another survey we did. Now, there was a key question in this study which asked satisfaction with different aspects of the campsites. There's a 5-point scale. As we often like to in market research, I'm going to merge together the top 2 categories to create a top 2 box score. I'm going to call it satisfied. Then these other columns don't interest me so much, so I'm going to hide them. Just move this to the right. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is going to strike you as a bit weird and maybe going to be a bit boring to watch, but my plan with this is that I show you every step of building these dashboards so that you can just get a feeling for how it's quite straightforward to do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by creating a very simple bar chart, which has just got a single number in a bar. I'm going to hook this chart up to this table that I just created. I'm going to select from it row number 1, and the column is the satisfied column. I'm going to format my little bar chart by making the font much smaller. I'm going to make the color of my font white. I'm going to make my bar really small. I'm then going to color code my bar chart. This is a kind of cool little technique. I'm going to, and I've got a little color palette on another screen that I'm copying and pasting from, but I'm going to start by making each of my bars red, like a traffic light kind of red color. And then I'm going to have them automatically recolor if more than 60% or 0.6 of people are satisfied. We're going to then turn them into an orange bar. Actually, and I chose too quickly. I chose a normal orange, but make my designers sad. Let me again copy their special orange that they like. And they like because they know what they're doing. Where's color? Not my skill. Apparently I'm partially colorblind, I've learned. All right. And then we're going to do the same idea again. And if the person's got a score of more than 0.8, or not person, data 80% satisfaction, we're now going to make it so the last color is green. So again, it's your classic traffic light kind of shading system, which is a general great way of doing things. Now this one doesn't quite fit. I'm going to, rather than drag and drop, it's often for micro control better just to type numbers in so you can get them exactly right. So we've just created one bar, and you might be thinking, one bar, why? Well, I'm going to give you another why moment because I'm going to duplicate it. And this is a key bit of the workflow of Displayr. You create something the way you like it, then you just duplicate them and keep modifying those duplicates. And so yes, I am building up a bar chart, chart by chart. And as I promised, it's going to be a slightly strange thing at first. And you're going to think, why? This seems a particularly slow and inefficient way to work. But it'll come together and we'll very shortly have something kind of cool. And let's move all these up a bit. I want to line them up exactly or close enough to the labels so that I can just read what they mean. Now, currently each of these little bars is linked to the top cell. So now I'm just going to keep going with my manual label approach to creating a bar chart. I'm just going to change the row numbers. And you'll notice that as I do this, the numbers are going to be updating. And you'll notice that the colors are also updating here. So the lower scores below that 60% benchmark that we set before, getting lower scores. Don't worry, I promise, almost into the interesting bit. We're pretty close to finished. Okay, so now we have, in a painstaking way, created a visualization. It's color coded, which is a bit cooler than most, but here's where we get to the fun bit. Again, one of our design team found this really cool image on the web of a campground. I'm going to just put little boxes on top of that image. And I'm going to paste that image over the top. It's not quite the right size, so I'm just going to zoom out and fit it exactly to the right size, send it to the back. Now, this is a very general design strategy here for building a dashboard. The idea is you create a picture that summarizes a business. So here I've got a campground. If you're doing an airline, it's the same bit. You'd have an outline of an aeroplane. If you're doing shopping center, outline of shopping center. It works in lots of situations. And then you just move your data so your data is on top of the relevant bits. So over here, I've got my store dimensions for my study, and I'm just going to click my store bars. I line them up. Now we're quickly building something kind of cool. I get my cooking or my campsite related, not campsite, my cooking area related attributes. Now you'll see that from the general layout tools, Displayr works a really lot like PowerPoint here. I can use my little keys and hold down control and things for micro adjustments. I can select multiple things and align things vertically, all that kind of stuff. Let's maximize the screen so we can see it really well. So we're almost there. Whoops. Leave him like that. I'll come back and tidy him in a second. All right, now these little boxes here don't look so good in the circle, so I'm going to change his shape. So again, it's the same modifier. I've duplicated something. I'm going to turn it into a little circle. And I'll micro control the dimensions of my circle. All right, so now it's nice and round. Put him in the middle of the circle hole that was created for him. Now, again, I'm going to take him and put him over the top of the current circle, doing that duplicate. Now, this one's currently showing row 1. The correct one was showing row 4. So I'm just going to delete that correct one and just put the 4 in here. And so that's a workflow that I'll repeat a few times. So again, it's this very standard methodology that Displayr is built around. You create something cool, and you duplicate it and modify it. So this one here is 11. So I'll make this one 11. And this one here is, this campsite one down here is 14. All right, now I've got the table over here. Again, I'm going to hide it so it's not appearing when we publish. I'm going to move it off the page just so it's a bit out of mind. But now for a really cool thing, we've just built this little dashboard, but now we're going to add some interactivity so that users can change the data. Looking at, oh, I forgot to do activities down here, didn't I? Let's quickly do that one. And the correct one here is 8. So the way we're going to add our interactivity, I'm going to click my table here. Then I'm just going to go into the menu here and I want to filter it. And I want to add what's called a combo box filter. And I'm going to filter the table based on the campsite that the person went to. And you see this little campsite or this little filter box appear at the top. Let's play around with its formatting, make it look a bit better. Also got a title here. Whoa, that wasn't what I wanted. All right, and so in no time at all, I've created this little interactive dashboard, which beautifully shows the performance of different campsites and allows me to give the user the ability to explore the data and have little visualizations automatically update. So I think that's pretty cool. I love this example. Design team did some great work on that, I think. The next example we're going to look at is more technical in that we're going to do some very simple calculations, but they're just not bespoke calculations. So the examples I just did were standard crosstabs, but what if you have to compute something a bit unusual? And this one uses data from a turf study. What we're going to do is we're going to build a tool so that the user is able to choose different bubblegum flavors and work out what level of appeal or reach these bubblegum flavors are going to have in their market. So I've got a survey of 700 odd people. Each of these people have told us which flavors they like. So these are the flavors. We need to start by creating a little control so that the user can choose what flavors they want. Now, when you create a control, by default, it's just got first and second option on it. We'll remove them and we're going to hook it up to some data, which is just a list of flavors. And so now it's showing us the different flavors of gum that we have in this particular study. The next thing we need to do is look at our data. So I'm going to choose the data here and I'm just going to go into table and have a look at the raw data itself, just so that we're all familiar with what we're trying to do here. It'll help you understand the calculations we're about to do. So the way we read this is each row represents the data from one person. Each column is a different flavor. And so looking at the first row, we can see the first person to complete the questionnaire liked classic, which is shown with a 1, didn't like super strong, liked grape, sour, orange, and cola. So what we need to now do is we need to create a new table which has got the raw data, but only for the selected flavors. And the way we do that is, again, we go into this table menu and just choose this very cool feature that our implementation team built called select. And the way it works is it's going to select the data from the table we've got, and we could choose which columns we want, but I'm just going to link it up to that list box we created before. And so now what you'll see is it's going to show us what data we've got selected, and I'm going to choose sour, and what else should I choose? Strawberry. And now you can see, whoops, it's only selecting one thing at a time, so I'm going to make it multi-select. Now I've got sour and strawberry selected, and it's showing me the data for sour and strawberry. Now, reading down this data, I can see respondent 1 liked at least one of the flavors, and all the way down to 7, they all liked one of the flavors, but respondent number 8 didn't like any of the flavors. Now, to calculate reach, which is what I'm trying to do in this particular example, I want to know the percentage of people who liked one or more of the flavors. And to do that, I first need to, for each person, work out if they liked one or more. In that case here, I just need to compute the maximum of each of the rows. So I go into calculation and I choose maximum for each row. And so now I've got data showing me the maximum for each row, so that's cool, that's what I want to do. And now to compute the actual reach, I just need the average of this data. So again, I go into calculation and I just want the average. And it gives me the average is 0.7. Let's add a decimal place to that. So my reach is 66%. What happens if I add cola to my portfolio of flavors? The reach goes up to 79.5%. Excellent. All right, let's now, I'm going to zoom out. Now we'll just make this look awesome. So I'll select all these calculations. I'm just going to move them off the page because no one wants to look at them. And I'll hide them. Let's maximize the screen so we can see everything a bit better. I am going to put a nice little feature in called a dynamic text box. I'm going to write reach is, and I'm going to hook that up to that number that we created before, the average calculation, which was the reach, and tell it that the number type is a percentage. All right, and let's make it look a little bit prettier. Now, I'm not a designer, so don't judge me here, but despite what my design team tell me, I kind of like to do things in comic book. And let's choose a lovely peach kind of pink. All right, so my reach is 79%. So this is very cool. As I said, it's going to update automatically. So my text is updating when my data changes. Now let's put a little visualization in, and the bling visualization when you're looking at data on what people, flavors and things people like, or product portfolios, is a Venn diagram. I'll hook that up to the selected columns that we did before. A little title, again, we'll click with my excellent color and font choices here. And here's one where my design team did something I really love. Now, this is one where they drew it from scratch. It wasn't a clip art thing, but it's just so clever. And it's a girl blowing bubbles. And so our Venn diagram, bubbles, which I just think is really clever. And the user can play around, add a new flavor in, and the bubbles change the Venn diagrams so they can see the underlying data, and we can see our reach calculations. I think that is rather cool. The last example we're going to look at is quite a bit more technical. It's something that often comes up in user support queries. It's things when people are building dashboards that they want to do. They want to make them look kind of PowerPointy, and they want to show statistical significance tests. So this is what I'm going to explore here. So this one's also from a tracking study. With this example here, we're going to create many pages. So just like in PowerPoint, it makes sense to go into the page master and set up the master slides properly. Now, as is often the case, we've got here a style guide that we've got to follow. In this case, for the brand Burger Chef, you could have it in PowerPoint. You just copy and paste things into Displayr, just like you would if you were doing PowerPoint. So I've just copied in the slide background here, and I'll resize it. And you'll see here that my page is the wrong size, so I need to make it widescreen. Again, just like PowerPoint, I'm going to send it to the back. Change the slot for the title. And I am going to left align it. All right, I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to do the title page as well, because design guidelines, my team's given me a title page. Again, I send it to the back. Let's put the title itself in this little black box. Make it 17-point font. Make it wide. Make it bold. All right. Cool. So we've built our little slide master. Let's go and look at the main data itself. We'll bring in a data set. Some data on some restaurant chains. Cool. Let's now maximize our screen. We'll insert the title page. Cool. Let's drag across some data. I'm going to drag across a data with the interesting name of Q. What's Q got in it? Okay, it's got our brand health metrics. Let's tidy up our data file. I'm going to switch the rows and columns of this. Now, my main focus on the burger brands, we are going to look at some of the other brands, but for this table looking at brand health, it makes sense to only compare it to the burger brands. So I'm going to select all the non-burger brands. And I'm going to hide them. All right, so there's my key data. Now, this is a tracking study going back some amount of period. We generally only look at our most recent data with something like this. So I'm going to filter it, and we'll filter it based on from the last 3 months. Let's also create some interactive filters so that users can look at this by age and gender. Do these as combo boxes again. Now they've appeared at the top of the screen. I'm going to move them to my slide master. So I'll cut them into my slide master. Just resize them to make sure they fit the right room. All right. Some text boxes on the page to show what they have. Again, like in a lot of things in Displayr, which I'm going to illustrate in this little thing, I go through and I create something that I like. And rather than create again from scratch, I duplicate it. And for reasons that'll become obvious soon, I'm going to duplicate it one more time. All right, brand next to this last one. Let's leave the slide master. Cool, so here's our table. That looks fine. Let's now insert a new page to put an actual visualization on. Okay, and so again, we go into the visualization menu. I'm putting a pyramid chart on. I'm going to hook it up to that brand health table we created before. I'm going to choose the show as small multiples option. We'll set it up so that there's just one row of them. We'll use, because the data is ordered, well, it's not quite ordered, is it? Let's go back and change the data, because the cool thing about Displayr is you can change the data and everything's going to update. So I'm going to order it in kind of a hierarchy of effects or purchase process sense, where we'll start with aided awareness, ever eaten, consider, or eaten last month. All right, let's play around a little bit. Let's put some data labels on. Let's get that heading tile off. Increase these font sizes a bit. And let's take, all right, so that looks all right, I think. So again, it's nice and interactive, which is cool. I'm showing the word brand at the bottom, and I haven't actually enabled brand yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little shape over the top of it just to hide it. This is often a good idea with slide masters. You rather than create a separate slide master for everything, it's often clever just to use a standard one and hide a few things. All right, so it's my brand health data. Now we're going to do one of the really cool things about Displayr that I keep talking about. It's duplicate and modify, but it's some more advanced option. I'm going to duplicate these two whole pages now. Now, this data here was showing brand health. I'm going to be looking at aided awareness data now. Now, brand health obviously includes aided awareness. So I'm going to expand out the actual underlying data, choose all of my aided awareness data. Then I am going to just duplicate it, combine it. So another form of modification. Now I've got some just aided awareness data, dragging them over the top. Cool. And I'm going to cross tab that by my data on time. Now my data on time here has gone through and it's showing weekly data. Let's turn that into monthly data. Now it's only showing me my last 3 months. Why is it doing that? Because you remember before we filtered this data. So let's take off the date in the last 3 months. Okay, now, so we've updated our data. That is cool. Let's now look at the next page where we want to show aided awareness. Now notice while we're doing this, Displayr is updating that visualization because when we duplicated the data and the visualization, it has managed to remember and understand the relationship and guess we want to update this. This is obviously the wrong type of chart for us now. Switch the rows and columns about and turn these into area charts. And they're going to quickly look really cool, assuming I'm clicking the right options under pressure. All right, let's do a few things. We're going to show this in 2 rows this time. I don't think we want to put the data labels on this. But what we do want to do is we want to put a trend line. Now, for those of you that want to, you can do your good old-fashioned, need to be a 3-month moving average. For those of you that have been to some of my visualization webinars, you'll know I'm not a big fan of them, so I'm actually going to change it to Friedman Super Smoother, which gives a much better feeling for trend. Let us increase the space between the headings at the top of the charts. And I'll go back to my little text box here, which I haven't done a great job of, have I? Put a little blue border around it. Let's fix that up on the one before too. All right, so we've now created a really nice little interactive visualization, which allows clients to explore all of the trend data for all of their brands and filter around with the age and gender, so they can be really quite self-sufficient. Now, think how much time that saves compared to having separate PowerPoint slides by each demographic. But don't worry, we're going to do something even cooler. Once more, we're going to duplicate the data or duplicate a page. And here I'm just going to look at it over time. And I'm going to change this data because I just want to create it so that we're looking at a single brand. So we can drill in on just that one brand and get a good feeling for it. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to add a little control, which is another combo box, which appears at the top. I'm going to hook this up to my list of brands, which were in that first table of aided awareness by over time. And again, I'm going to cut that guy and put him onto my page master, which is why I left this little slot before. He's hidden on this page, so just remove that box. Now I've just got to hook up my visualization so that it's using this data. As I switch the rows and columns, I'm going to separate it, put this into the columns. So column manipulation, select columns by choosing. And what columns do we want to show? Whoop, I click sort. Didn't want to do that. We'll hook this up to our combo box. Now it's just showing the data for Pizza Heaven. I'm going to turn that back into a column chart, which usually works better. We're going to put some data labels on it. Now, a really common question we get with a visualization like this is, how do we show significance testing comparing over time? So I'm going to show that to you now. We'll go back to the aided awareness data. And I'm going to put onto this few things. The first thing I'm going to do is, currently it's doing general significance testing. So if you look at Nuovo Burger, it shows low results versus high results. So I'm going to change the style of significance testing so that it does comparisons to the previous time period. So now each arrow is going to tell us when something is bigger or smaller than the previous time period. And I'm going to put the Z statistics on. This is a kind of a slightly technical way of doing something, but it's going to allow us to draw some arrows in a second. Now, the Z statistic, for those of you who aren't statisticians, is just a way of displaying significance levels. And so a score of more than 1.96 is significantly high and less than 1.96 is significant decline. And what that allows me to do then is I'm going to add some annotations to this chart here. And I was going to take the trend off this, which I will. And now I go into my little section on data labels, which I put on before, and I'm going to have an annotation. I want an arrow up, and I want that arrow up to appear based on the Z statistic being above 1.96. And now I want to have arrows going down. And again, it's the same logic as before, based on the Z statistic. If it's below the threshold of minus 1.96. And so now you can see that in this data, the only real significant bump was in November. We can see that Pizza Heaven went up and then it went down. Now those arrows are not quite a bit too big, so I'm going to change the font size of them. Let's a bit more. 8. There's other kind of symbols we can use other than arrows. Cool. So now we've done significance tests over time, which is pretty cool. Now another question is, well, having done this, how do I keep doing it? Well, this is the good bit. We can just select these 3 pages, all of our aided awareness data now, right click and go duplicate. Now I just plug in some new data. I'm going to show ever eaten data. Just as I did before, I go into all of my brand health data, find ever eaten, select it all, duplicate. So it's the same workflow. I duplicate something and I modify it, just drag it over the top. The table updates and my visualization updates without me having to redo anything. How's that for a time saver? All right, so what we've seen is the basics of how we can start to build a more long form dashboard which can replace a PowerPoint presentation, giving our users the ability to interact directly with the data and an efficient kind of workflow too, where we're able to very quickly build what we want to build. What questions do you have? We're now at the question time bit of the session. So if you type them into the GoToWebinar box, I'll answer them. The first question from Larry, g'day Larry, is, can this be done in Q or just Displayr? I'm sorry, Larry, Q is for analysis. Displayr is for analysis and reporting. And so this is all just in Displayr. Displayr is designed so that you can simultaneously explore and visualize your data at the same time. It's the whole reason we built it. Salvador says, what would be the best way to create a dashboard to compose of many small files, databases? Well, that would be just using exactly the same techniques I've just shown you, because you can have lots of databases in this one study. So I built this example here with one data set, but I can bring in my camping data set and have a second data set in exactly the same place, drag across that data we looked at before, bring in the image that we used for the camping sample before, and do multiple data files at the same time. And furthermore, I can even hook the databases up. So let's say that they relate to similar people or the same people. I can click this and create relationships based on if there's matching variables between them. Lewis asks, are these data sets available for practice? Well, they will be, Lewis. We're going to send you a recording of this session, and we're also going to include each of the data sets so you can play around and practice yourself. Thank you for asking. What other questions have we got? Margaret asks, how do you update this? If you've got new data, do you have to build it all again? Definitely not. That's actually one of the key reasons we built our software. When you've got a data file, it's going to have a look at the data, looking at ever eaten over time. So the last time period we're looking at here, it's showing us December. And I'm going to bring in a new data file, which has actually got less data in it because I'm doing things back to front. And all I have to do is I can click on the data file. I click update, swap out the new data file. So I'm going to choose one that finishes in October. And you're going to see the last 3 periods disappear from this visualization. Just imagine in reverse though, which would obviously have been a better way to demonstrate this, adding the time periods rather than removing the time periods, but it's exactly the same idea. So everything magically happened. If the questionnaires had had different types of formats, we would have got a warning of some kind about, that the variables didn't line up. Bob's got a great question. Bob wants to know, how do I do column comparison stat tests? So the stat tests that we've looked at here use little arrows, which I really like in trackers and things like that. I think they're easier on most people's brain. But you can, of course, change your significance tests, and often you need to compare columns explicitly. So I go into significance, and I do column comparisons like this. So how do I then put them on a visualization? Well, let's look at our ever eaten data that we had here before. I'm going to now duplicate this page. And I'm going to change it. So rather than looking at the ever eaten data, I'm going to look back at that brand health data where I just put the column comparisons. I'm going to see an error in a second. The error is going to be one of Display's lovely informative errors. It says table does not contain Pizza Heaven, because you remember I filtered this data to match to what brand the person had selected. I need to unfilter it. And now it's telling me that the annotation data does not contain a statistic called Z statistic and allowable names of percentage and column comparisons, because you remember I put into the data labels, remember we hooked them up to Z statistics. I'm going to write column comparisons. And I don't want arrows anymore. I want to show the actual text after the label, put a little gap in between the text and the significance labels. And then I've got to remove the second one down here. All right, and so now it's showing that for all of the brands, and I've got significance tests, let's turn it off, and for all of the attributes, let's just, it's a bit busy for my mind, I'm just gonna limit it so that we're just looking at aided awareness. Whoops, it's not how you spell it, is it? You have to get the case right here. Let's wrap those, and not wrap, let's change those x-axis categories so they're horizontal. Let's again put a little shape over the top. Right, and so now we've got significance tests comparing the performance of the different brands, and it's filterable again so the users can create their own charts. Jacob asks, thinking about a dashboard, can we utilize a custom URL domain that we own? Kind of is the answer. There's two things you can do. The first thing is we can give you a subdomain. So it might say, rather than go app.displayr, it might say app.jacob.displayr. The second thing you can do is you can insert a whole visualization as an iframe on another app, or a whole dashboard as an iframe. So you have your other app, then you have a box on it, and on that box, and in that box appears Displayr, and that works very effectively as well. What other questions we've got? That's all the questions we've got. Look, for all of our users out there, thank you very much for being our users. For everybody that was happy to take the time in the day to look at this webinar, I really appreciate it. Keen to get any more questions or things you wish to know, just send me an email, tim.bock, B-O-C-K, @displayr.com. Anyway, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye now.